I think the important thing is to find your why. Like a lot of people have goals and they'll tell you, this is my goal, but you need to dig deeper and see why is it that that's your goal. Like,
freedom is not free. Discover what it takes. It's time to tap and move forward.
Hello and welcome to Tap and Move Forward. I'm your host, Lynn Shelley. Welcome to my first episode in the second year of the podcast. The first year was so much fun and so much work. Thank you for all the support, downloads, and shares after my first year. I'm really excited to continue to bring more impressive and interesting interviews and would love some support. If you have something to contribute, whether it be time or financial, the podcast is now on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/TAMF podcast or go to tamppodcast.com for a link. If you have any extra time and would like to help with marketing, processing episodes, or communicating with possible guests, I would love some extra help. And you can email me at tamfpodcast@gmail.com. If you just want to support by listening, I hope you enjoy this fun and informative interview with Arlo Gagestein. I was excited and wanted him on the show after I found a great informative section in his book on preparing for a military PT test. Arlo is a strength and conditioning specialist, licensed massage therapist, and owner of Competitive Edge Fitness in Ogden, Utah. He has been training competitive athletes, military, law enforcement, and martial artists for 2 decades. He specializes in thinking and training outside the box. And after the amount of times people have told me to just do more push-ups or sit-ups in order to prepare for a PT test, I'm really excited to present you with someone who can give you a much more dynamic and powerful response. Now the interview with Arlo Gagestein. I have to say, I was kind of overwhelmed by your book. And it's just got so much information. It's really content rich. And the first thing I want to ask you is, it seems like the fair amount of your content and the way that you support people in working out is very... I want to say functional. I know that's kind of a buzzword right now, like functional fitness, but it doesn't really look like, some of it may look like what you would do in a regular gym, but most of it, like the grand majority, is very unique.
For sure.
What led you in that direction?
Honestly, I get bored doing regular things. Like if I had to sit in a gym and do what everybody always does, it'd drive me crazy. So I've always done things weird. Like I've owned my gym for 15 years now, and every time anybody comes, they're like, I've never seen this anywhere. Like, this is so different. It's definitely meant to be functional. Like, I focus on movements as opposed to individual muscle groups, whatever, because the body functions as a unit, and I believe that's how you should train it. So yeah, definitely, I've always kind of been more on the functional side, and injury prevention is huge also, because if you are injured, you can't do much of anything to be as productive. So we try and avoid that, especially when working with military, law enforcement, whatever, fighters. If they're injured, that's not good for them. So we need to really make that a priority.
Yeah, and you do a lot of that in your book too, is talking about injury prevention and like corrective procedures, which I loved to see. Like, I don't feel like many books I've seen that really go that in depth on it. Right. And you're even passionate about it. It sounds like you became a massage therapist.
Yes.
Because
because I was always injured. So I'm like, I got to fix something.
And becoming a massage therapist, did that help you in the way you worked out?
It didn't change what I was doing a whole lot. It changed how I addressed different issues with people, because everybody that I train, like, people have shoulder pain, knee pain, whatever. And being a massage therapist now, And specifically the style or modality of body work that I do makes it so I can address those issues on the spot. And so that's changed a lot. Like if we're doing something with a client and they're like, oh, this is bothering my knee, I can address it right then rather than just being like, okay, well, we'll avoid that exercise and we'll try this instead. I can be more aware of why is this bothering his knee, and is there something I can do right here to fix it.
And if someone doesn't have someone like you right there readily available, would you
Yeah.
recommend in that circumstance that maybe they lay off that exercise?
Yeah. I mean, kind of a general training rule is that if something hurts, you want to avoid doing it, or it's
Right.
going to make it worse, right?
Yeah.
And then try and figure out why is this an issue? Why is this hurting?
Or you can try the corrective procedures
Absolutely,
that
yes.
you
Yep.
that you go through in your
Yeah,
book.
for sure.
You were saying that you like to focus on specific movements instead of
Yes.
muscle groups.
Yep.
Do you change those movements or kind of prescribe those movements based on the person that you're working with?
Definitely, yeah. So we do a functional assessment before we start training someone, and that will show us what movements they're lacking in and what they need to work on. So a big one that a lot of people aren't very good at is rotation, but it's such a big part of everything. Like typical exercises in a gym don't address rotation very much, typical lifting, weight training. But every activity in daily life, in sports, in combat, everything's rotation. So that's lacking for a lot of people. That's definitely something that we prioritize.
I have a friend that's a physical therapist, and she was
Okay.
telling me that sometimes they have people come in that she calls them beach muscles.
Right.
Where they look like they should be capable of doing quite a
Yeah.
bit, but then
Yep.
sometimes a very simple rotation will give them a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
they look like they should be able to handle it,
Right.
but their beach muscles
Definitely. We
are
call that all show, no go.
also no go. I like that. It makes a lot of sense, because a lot of times when it comes down to it, those aren't the people that are running into a difficult situation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which brings me back around to, you do seem to, not only is the name of your book Battle Tested, which is very much showing that you're looking for people that are either training for a type of battle or that have that kind of drive to have some sort
Right.
of warrior type mentality or foundation. So what really drove you to, what inspired you to support that particular group of people?
So I've always been a huge supporter of our military and law enforcement. I mean, we owe so much to them, and we take for granted the freedom that we have in this country and the safety that we have the majority of the time, and they're really the people that are out there sacrificing for us to have that freedom and that safety. And so, I mean, I've always, my family too has always been in the military. Like so it started back as far as I can remember. My grandfather, my family immigrated from the Netherlands. My dad did. But my grandfather in World War II was part of the Dutch underground and very
wow.
active there. And then my dad fought in Vietnam with the Army, and he came back and went to work as a civilian with the Air Force. And my brother was in the Marines,
Wow.
and my sister was in the Navy. And so,
Awesome.
so like our whole family has always been very supportive of the military.
Did you ever think about joining it?
You know, I thought about it, but I was actually the first one that did not join the military in my family, and I went a different route. But I still support them and want to do whatever I can to support them.
And not just the military though too, because I'm sure you attract firefighters, and you said
Yeah, we've
law
worked with a
enforcement.
couple of firefighters, law enforcement definitely. I have a contract with Ogden City Police, where I am the fitness consultant for the Ogden City Police Department,
cool.
and then I also teach ground fighting there twice a week at the police department.
Very cool. You do talk a little bit about mindset in the beginning of the book.
Right,
You just
right.
kind of brush on the top of it.
Okay, yeah.
But do you work with people with their mindset quite a bit?
A little bit. So most of the people that end up finding me already have a pretty good mindset. I think it's huge. Like it's more important than their physical abilities, honestly. But
Why do you say that?
just because you can have the most physical person with a bad mindset and they're not going to perform very well. but you can always improve on physical ability, and you can improve on mindset too. But if you have someone that lacks that mindset, that drive, that desire to kind of push their boundaries and get outside of where they're comfortable, they're going to make a lot more progress, and they're going to perform better in any type of adverse situation.
Have you firsthand witnessed people that are really getting in their own way?
Yeah, definitely. So I've worked with a lot of athletes from a lot of different sports, and honestly, that was me. Like high school sports, high school tennis. Even once I started, so I played volleyball, club volleyball at Weber State. I was my own worst enemy. Like all through high school, I was very athletic. I was a good tennis player. And the first set, I'd crush the other guy. I'd do really, really well, and I'd start getting in my head that, oh, I'm doing good, I'm going to win this one, and I'd fall apart. And like the mental side was definitely what I was lacking, and I would love to go back to competitive sports now with knowing what I know, and I think I'd do a lot better. But
How would you train yourself on that? Like if you now could go back to you then, what would you say to yourself?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think just my entire perspective is different enough already that I don't know that it would take a lot of self-talk. Just knowing that you're not out of the woods. Even I might have a substantial lead, whatever, in a competition, but it's not over until somebody wins. So instead of where I was in high school, where I was thinking, oh, I'm going to win before I ever got there.
Do you think you kind of on some level were kind of like feeling like you could just coast
Yes.
at that point?
Yep.
But then there was still more challenge, is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
definitely.
You couldn't coast. It was
Right.
interesting. So if you were talking to a group of high school athletes, what would you say to them to help them with their own mentality?
Oh, that's fabulous. That's a good question. I think a lot of it goes to training. Like definitely you want to train the way that you're going to compete. And I think a lot of athletes at a high school level and beyond struggle with that, where they kind of avoid doing the hard things in training at practice. They're trying to get away with as little as possible unless they're super driven, which definitely not all of them are. Some are, and they usually excel in competition as well. But a lot of people don't want to put in the extra work, and because of that, because they're avoiding the extra work, they're avoiding the discomfort. Once they get to competition and they're in that place where they're a little uncomfortable, they're going to fold rather than excel.
Have you thought about why people are so resistant to discomfort?
People don't like being uncomfortable, I think, is the
Sure.
main thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I guess it's so you think it's just that it's uncomfortable, then the very nature of
I
being
think that's part of
uncomfortable,
it.
we
That's
just don't
part of
want
it.
to be uncomfortable.
I think another thing we see in people is that they don't want to look bad to the people around them. They're so focused on, well, if I do this hard thing, I'm going to struggle, and it's going to be hard for me, and I don't want people to see that.
Yeah, it's struggle for sure.
Yeah.
And it can be very uncomfortable to have people witnessing you be
Right.
in the struggle.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I've started to notice myself, just with some of the work that I've done with like our new recruits, that there are some that are almost more scared of their results. You know, I've heard a lot of people talking about the mindset and everything, and they're like, once you get those results, then it just fuels you. But I've seen some that they start to get results and then they slide back.
Yeah, it is interesting. You have people that go both ways. Same thing with people trying to lose weight, where they'll work out really hard, and you'll have some people that are like, well, I'm not going to eat that garbage now that I've been working so hard, and other
Right.
people that will be like, well, now I can eat that garbage because I've
Right.
been working hard.
Right. I've been thinking about it. The only thing I can really come up with is that, and this goes along with the discomfort as well.
Uh-huh.
I think that there's a mindset it's their self-image
Right.
as far as how they perceive themselves, their self-concept.
Yeah, yeah.
And they just can't believe in themselves as an athlete,
Okay.
or
Right,
as
right.
as a strong, or even having strong athletic performance, like leave the athlete out of it. But if they can't witness or believe that that is something that's for them,
Yeah.
then as soon as they get results, it's almost like they're scared of it.
You're right, right.
But I like what you're saying too about how you had to really make it interesting for yourself,
Yes.
because
Yeah, definitely.
if you try and force feed yourself somebody else's workout plan.
Right.
So how did you kind of come up with your own?
So I gather inspiration everywhere. Like, I don't know. I do make stuff up. Like, a lot of people accuse me of you just made this up, which is true. Sometimes it
You're like,
happens.
yeah,
But
yeah, I did.
yes.
Actually,
But also, like, I do a lot of reading and spending time watching video, reading blogs, reading books, training specific for sure. I mean, I love all kinds of books, but training specific, and over my career, I've read hundreds of books from hundreds of coaches with hundreds of perspectives, and I just kind of I take what I like and what works and kind of just blend it together and to keep things fun and interesting.
I like that you bring that up too, because when I first decided, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to really get good at my PT,
Yeah.
and I started just consuming any content I could.
Right.
And I started to realize that it seemed just as charged as religion.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
in
that's
the
true.
health and fitness world, there's one person that'll say, you don't ever do this. And then another
Yeah.
person that will be like, that's ridiculous. This is a very important exercise. And they'll completely contrast each other, but with like the same
Yeah, for
amount
sure.
of excitement and passion, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it does become difficult. Like how would you recommend for somebody else to navigate through all of that?
I think it's important to try different ideas. Like, you're going to see different perspectives on things, and people that completely butt heads on whether you should do this or not. And my advice would be, try it and see, does it work for you or does it not? Because a lot of times that's the issue, is that things that work for some people aren't going to work as well for others. And so if something doesn't work for us, it starts to kind of reinforce in our mind that, yeah, we shouldn't be doing this. This isn't good. But it might work fine for somebody else. So experimentation is a huge part of where I got where I am now, and the things that we do in the gym and outside of the gym is just trying new things and seeing, yeah, do we like this? Do we not? And if we do, great, let's use it.
I would think that would add to the engagement of the exercise as well.
Yes, yeah,
It's,
for
there,
sure.
There's an element of curiosity that you're including.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that come to us for that, because it's unlike anything they've done, and they're curious, like, well, what are we going to do now? Makes it fun and interesting for them, and fun for me, and it's great.
Yeah, no, I get it, because I realized early on that it was really a lot easier for me to get more fit if I was doing martial arts or
Yeah,
something outside
right.
of just a traditional workout plan, just because it's far more interesting, but it still is
Yeah.
engaging my body.
Yeah, absolutely. The best exercise is the one you're going to do. That's what
I love that. That makes so much sense. 'Cause how often do you work out?
So I train jiu-jitsu a lot. Like I said, I'm teaching twice a week, and then I usually train 3 other times a week. So I'm on the mats 5 times a week, minimum. And then as far as lifting, I do, because I work in a gym and I'm there all day, I do random stuff throughout the day rather than setting aside. Like, it's been a long time since I just lifted for an hour. I do a little bit here, wait a couple hours, I'm doing something else, and just kind of work it into my day. And that may or may not be ideal, I don't know, but it works because of the environment that I'm in.
I would imagine, like you said, that the best exercise is the one you do,
Right.
right? So as long as you're engaging.
Yeah.
But I can hear how there might be some some trainer somewhere that's like, why is he doing it that way? That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah,
But
for
that
sure.
goes back to what we were talking about before. And I love you saying that too, because that's it's almost glorifying the struggle. You know how we were
Yes.
talking about how it can be really uncomfortable to watch or to have somebody watch you struggle, but
Right.
you've actually ingrained it or made it as part of the workout.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that discovery is part of
yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
process, and it's almost glorifying it because you're just learning from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think we definitely learn through our struggles more than we do any other time. Like when things are going great, there's not much to learn, right? We're content, we get complacent. Definitely when you're struggling, you learn a lot about yourself. And I love it. And I think that's good. Like going back to the high school, the group of high school kids, what would you tell them
Mm-hmm.
about mindset? Just enjoy the struggle. Like that's where you're going to learn the most. That's where you're going to grow the most. And learn to accept it as a good thing instead of, oh, this sucks, this is terrible.
Right. Would you talk about it briefly in your book as well?
Uh-huh.
And I love it too because in the military, one of our favorite sayings is "embrace the suck,"
Right.
right?
Yep.
So, and it's such a common phrase, but I remember when I was a new recruit, I didn't quite understand what they meant by that. You know,
Okay.
it's like, what
Yeah,
are they
yeah.
telling me? Like to be more miserable, like as miserable as possible? Like, what is it that they're saying? But
Yeah.
and as time has passed, I've realized that, you know, if you can embrace that challenge or that
Right.
struggle,
Definitely.
that that's a more magical spot. And just there in your book too, there's the like the little circle that says here's your comfort zone, and then
Yeah,
outside of
yeah.
it says where the magic
Yeah,
happens.
for sure.
And I love that too, because you really do have to get outside of the
Yeah.
comfort zone.
Yeah, definitely.
When you are training somebody who is military, um, what kind of movements are you looking for them?
So definitely it's really for anybody that I train, but rotation is a big one, like I've mentioned. Level change, like going from high to low, lunging positions, that kind of stuff is big. A lot of anaerobic type stuff too, where they're running and switching directions and running rather than linear running. Like we want to be mobile and agile and in different directions. And then yeah, so there are foundational movements that everybody does and has to do. Like we have horizontal polling, whether I'm pulling a rope with something on it towards me or whether I'm doing rows with a dumbbell in the gym. Either way, that's a horizontal. And then horizontal push, which would be the opposite, trains all the antagonist muscles. All the opposite muscles would be any kind of push up or bench press or thing like that. Vertical push and pull. Vertical push is any kind of overhead stuff, whether it's an overhead carry, whether it's an overhead shoulder press. And then pull ups would be vertical pull ups, pull downs. And I mean, there's a ton of different variations too that people haven't heard of that are vertical pulls. And then hip dominant movements are really, really important. I think a lot of people lack there. And knee dominant. So knee dominant would be any kind of squat. Hip dominant is like step ups and good mornings and that kind of stuff where your hip is the prime mover.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, that's actually where a lot of people end up injured or just with chronic pain, is because they have lost that hip engagement where their glutes aren't as active as they should be, and their hamstrings and their lower back kind of try and take over that movement. And then they end up with low back pain, with knee pain. So really focusing on hip mobility and the ability to engage the glutes and core are really important for people, and something that we prioritize.
Interesting. So are you saying that people are getting hurt there more because they haven't been using or training those areas properly versus
Part of it's
overusing?
that. Part of it is in not moving enough too. Like as people that sit all day long
Right.
at a desk
Yeah.
or whatever, the tendency is for their glutes and core to become weak and lengthened, and their hip flexors and low back to tighten up, and that compresses the lumbar spine and gives them issues. So
I heard recently about a study that they did that was saying that sitting at a desk all day was worse than smoking
Right, right.
for how many health hazards
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
just from sitting.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's a big problem for sure. Um, to say it's worse than smoking, I don't know. That's
Yeah,
kind of, but
it seems extreme too.
it seems extreme, but
Yeah.
don't smoke if you're
Right? No, that
but
doesn't mean that
right,
it's
right.
safe to
But yeah, I
smoke.
mean, sitting all day definitely leads to a lot of different complications.
So people whose job is sitting at a desk, what kind of
Uh-huh.
advice or support do you usually give them?
So just getting up and moving consistently, whether it's once an hour or whatever, is important. But then there's a lot of like the corrective stuff for in my book. There's a section, I can't remember which corrective one it is, 2 or 3 or something, but focuses on the hips and lower back. And there's a lot of different exercises you can do to counteract sitting all day,
Right.
like things to strengthen the glutes, strengthen the abs, and also to address tightness in the lower back and hip flexors. So.
I love what you're talking to about variety, where you're like, and there's a lot more options and
Right, right.
varieties than people think of. And you display that quite clearly in your book, like talking about all of the different
Yeah.
variations. But I think too, online you can usually find that there's a fair amount of variations.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think
For sure.
in the military, at least the people that I've talked to, they get into a habit of feeling like their only options if they're preparing for the PT test is to actually do more push-ups and actually do more sit-ups and
Right, right.
actually run more.
Yeah.
And they just need to do more of that, and then they can be better at it. But it's boring and people don't want to do it and there's resistance.
Yeah.
But there's so many varieties.
There are for sure. Yeah, there's dozens I can think of off the top of my head of variations of push-ups. Like you can definitely keep it interesting, and it's going to still help you on the PT
And
test.
it sounds like, but it sounds like part of your drive and determination was to find variety
Yes.
in
Yep.
all of that.
For sure.
So, and you do have a chapter or a section in there specifically for the military PT test or helping
Right,
people
right.
prepare for that.
Yeah.
But what kind of tips can you give my listeners if they're preparing for their PT test?
So typically where you're supposed to do a repetitive movement like push-ups, like sit-ups, there's a couple of ways to improve that. The stronger you are, obviously, each repetition will be easier, and so you won't fatigue as quickly. So if we can make someone's chest and shoulders stronger, that's going to help them do more push-ups.
Right.
The other side is repetition. If we can improve their endurance by doing a lot of repetitions, even if they're easier repetitions, like for example, it's easier to do a push-up with your hands on the first stair or the second stair. So what we will do to improve somebody's PT score is we focus on both sides and approach it from both angles. So we definitely want to include max push-ups, as many as they can do, the way they're supposed to do them, but we're also going to include trying to strengthen the movement. Strengthening the core too is huge. It's hard to do very many push-ups if your core is weak. That can definitely be a limiting factor. So we're going to strengthen the chest and shoulders and triceps as well as the core, and that's going to improve their push-up. And then we'll go the other way too, that we might have them do as many push-ups as they can, regular push-ups, and then when they can't do anymore, we'll put their hands on a stair and make them keep going just to build that endurance.
Right. Because if you stop there, you're not actually pushing your
Right.
capability.
Yes. Yeah.
You've got to
yeah.
keep going, and so you
Yep.
find a way to keep going.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Which makes a lot of sense. What about sit-ups?
So sit-ups I hate to begin with, but I mean I understand they do have a purpose, and I understand that that military people especially have to improve that.
Right.
But
I think
we'll
there's
do
a
the same
fair
thing.
amount that hate it though and
Yeah.
feel validated just
Right,
hearing you
right.
say it.
Yeah, so right. So if you want fuel for that argument, repetitive lumbar flexion, the sit-up motion, can cause lower back pain if that's all you do. So if you look at your spine like the mast on a ship, you have guide wires going all different directions. That's how your core is supposed to function. right? You have stabilizer muscles. You have muscles on the lower back that are part of core stability. You have the obliques that kind of crisscross at different angles. And if all you're doing is sit-ups, it's like you're tightening one of those guy wires and tightening one of those guy wires and tightening one of those guy wires. And what happens to the mass? It's gonna fold over, right?
Right.
So it needs to be a more comprehensive core strengthening that we need to do by addressing all the different aspects of it, all the different angles, and avoiding just so we do. I mean, we will train the sit-ups simply to get better at being able to do more repetitions, but we're going to spend just as much time strengthening all of the other abdominal muscles and lumbar stabilizers.
That's really interesting. That's awesome, though. That makes a lot of sense. What about for the run?
For the run, I like to take the same approach where we're going to do things that are harder and things that are faster, and then also run at the same speed. So if I'm training for a run, this is a big difference actually too between my training philosophy and most other people. So as a massage therapist, I work on a lot of runners that have overuse injuries, whether it's plantar fasciitis, shin splints, hip issues, lower back pain, knee pain. Runners
Yes.
are always broken. And a lot of it is because if you look at a half marathon or marathon training program, they're running 5 or 6 days a week. And
Right.
they're doing the same thing over and over. And they might have variation. They might go different speeds. They have tempo runs. They have speed days. Which
But
is
it's all
awesome. And
runs.
they're running every single day. So when training for the run, I train 2 to 3 times a week at the most where they're actually running. One of those days is going to be a speed day. So we'll look at what their goal is for their score on the 1.5 or 2 mile. What pace they need to go to hit their goal, and then their speed days are going to be faster than that, doing shorter interval type stuff where they might run 400 meters, they might run 800 meters, and they'll do it over and over and over again. So they're going to hit 2 miles, either 4 800s or 8 400s is going to be 2 miles, but we're going to do it at a faster pace. And then as they get better, we'll try and maintain that fast pace and decrease the rest in between intervals. So one day will be a speed day. One day they're going to run at the pace that they need to go for as long as they can. And if they don't make it the whole distance, that's fine. We're going to run at the pace they need to go until they can't. They'll stop, they'll rest, and then they'll pick up again at the same pace and try and do it. So we don't want is to train them running slower than they need to, if that makes sense. Because a lot of people will go out, and so another day, if I was doing 3 days of running, the other day, and something they need to do at least every few weeks or month, depending how soon their PT test is coming up, is we will run the 2 mile or the 1.5 miles, depending.
Right, on which branch.
Yeah, depending which branch. So we will have them do it at whatever pace they can, and we're trying to do that faster and faster for sure. So there's most everything when I try and improve somebody's performance, whether it's a PT test or some particular lift that they want to get better at, we're going to approach it from several different angles with the central goal of performing better.
I really like that. Like I really appreciate that. And I think part of it too is I've asked a lot of people for advice on getting better on PT tests, but a lot of times I feel like I still get, do more push-ups and do more sit-ups as the response and practice running,
Yeah.
But I did have someone tell me kind of what you're saying. I actually think I like yours a little bit better. It's a little more intense, but he had me break it down into quarter mile intervals.
Yes.
And to make sure that I was running faster than what I needed to for my goal.
Yeah.
And then just adding on quarter mile intervals. Yep. So, but it was, to me, it was like magic because I could never, it was like this glass ceiling that I could never beat my my run, and I had wanted to just run faster than I had in basic training. That was
Okay.
my only goal.
Yeah, yeah.
And it had taken me, and it was like years and years later, and I'm like, it just doesn't feel like I can do it. And then after that advice, I actually beat my basic training time
Oh,
by
fantastic.
over a minute.
Nice.
So, and I couldn't believe it when it happened. I like literally was just overcome because I've been struggling with it for so long.
Yeah.
So just I know you're giving really good applicable advice.
Good.
I think those are really skill sets that somebody can apply, and especially it's kind of like a holistic perspective, right? Where you're looking at all of the things and not just you need to do more push-ups or you need to do more sit-ups.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
think
for
about all of the areas that are supporting it.
Uh-huh.
I had one new recruit say that he just started doing squats while he was at his desk at work.
Oh, okay.
And he said it improved his run time just
yeah.
by developing some of those muscles.
Yeah.
So,
And so that is the other aspect. And I didn't mention it, but definitely we look, especially with runners that have a lot of overuse injuries, we look at why is this happening? Why do you have the overuse injury? And we address that in the training for sure. Like most of the time when somebody has a knee issue or a hip issue, it can be related to, and I go over this in the book. So if you are having knee pain, a lot of times it's not an issue with the knee, it's either an issue with the joint above or below. So it could be a hip mobility or an ankle mobility issue that's causing the knee pain. And so we need to look at both of those and see what the limitation is and why you're having pain. Same thing with the hips. A lot of times it's a core stability issue or hip mobility. And the joints kind of alternate between needing stability and needing mobility. So your ankle joint needs more mobility typically. Knee joints typically need more stability. The hips typically need more mobility. Lumbar spine typically needs more stability. So they kind of alternate on the way up from the foot. And so that's why if I have an issue at one joint, I need to look at above and below and see. Because if I have a stability issue in the lumbar spine, it's going to change the movement pattern at the hip, and it's going to affect everything on down. So
that makes sense.
That was kind of a long tangent.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great, and it makes sense. And I know from a lot of things that usually they say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but but sometimes the squeaky wheel isn't the actual problem, right? At least when it comes to our bodies.
Yeah, definitely.
Whatever's the loudest, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the point that's has the most damage, or and that can be tricky to work with. I guess sometimes in those points you just need to reach out to somebody who has more experience.
For sure.
I know when I was in basic training, there were a lot of people that struggled with shin splints.
Right.
What is that? Really?
So it can be a variety of things. One big cause of shin splints is just going from relative inactivity to doing a lot, to being on your feet all the time. Yeah, it's just the stress of changing things. You'll get that in high school athletes too, at the beginning of cross country season, at the beginning of basketball season, where they haven't been doing much, and then all of a sudden they're practicing 5 days a week. So that can definitely be part of it. Another issue, a lot of times it is ankle mobility, where their calves are super tight and kind of overpowering the muscles on the front of the shin. And so typically what we will do is massage work, whether it's self-myofascial release, like with a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, whatever. There's a lot of different ways to massage the calves, but to loosen the calves and make them, which will improve the ankle mobility, and then strengthen the shins. There's exercises we can do to strengthen the muscle along the shin, and that will correct it a lot of times. So massage and stretching for the calves, and then strengthening the shins.
I love the foam roller. I love it, but I think that's just a piece of me that just loves the way that it feels. 'Cause it's like it kind of can be like a massage.
Yeah.
But I don't really know all the benefits of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So your muscles are all connected with fascia, which is it's just connective tissue. It's very mobile. It should be.
It should be.
It should be. Yep, it loses its quality for sure. But foam rolling is just to kind of keep that fascia malleable and movable and pliable, to create movement or to respond to movement. So as the fascia tightens, it restricts movement. Foam rolling, any kind of pressure and heat together gets it moving again.
Which
And
is
so
why
that's the
you
benefit of
use
foam rolling.
you use the
Buffer,
the
yeah,
buffer,
yeah,
because it does both at the same
It
time,
does,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
that
for
makes
sure.
sense why it's kind of magical,
Right.
It looks kind of funny to see people buffing
It
their
looks very
legs.
funny.
But that goes back to what we were saying, like sometimes it can be awkward to be witnessed during the struggle. But,
Right,
But
yeah.
if it works,
Yeah, definitely.
So what can cause the fascia to become too tight?
So different things. If you have an injury, that can definitely be it. So limited movement allows fascia to build up and kind of interweave and get less healthy. So
Sitting at a
there's
desk all day?
sitting at a desk all day.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep, for sure. There's a video online. It's a really old video, but it's educationally about fascia. It's absolutely fantastic. It's called The Fuzz Speech by Gil Headley, and he really goes through the fuzz or fascia and how it should yield to movement, but if it's not moving, then it doesn't. So he goes through and says, talks about as you sleep, the fuzz builds up between the sliding surfaces of your muscles. And then when you move, it melts the fuzz and it moves how it should. But if you don't move, it doesn't. And then you go to bed again, you get a second night fuzz on top of the first night, and it gets more restrictive, right? And doesn't
Interesting.
slide as well. And he goes through like a shoulder injury too, where if I injure my shoulder and I'm afraid to lift my arm very high because my shoulder is going to hurt, I'm going to develop more fuzz there. And the fascia is going to become more restrictive. And the longer I go without moving it, the more the fascia builds up and becomes restrictive until it won't move, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
So I'd highly recommend The Fuzz Speech
I'm excited. I
by
totally
Gil
want to.
Headley. And he's a total goofball. It's hilarious. He's funny to watch, but
Humor and education.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't get much better than that. It makes a lot of sense to me that the shin splints happen because, and I remember I had some issues when I started preparing for basic, because I went from never doing push-ups ever in my life to
right.
freaking out about it and doing like every exercise I could think of. And so is there a better way to kind of navigate when you've got the excitement that you want to improve, so you're ready to go, but then you don't want to overwork or cause injury on the other end?
Right. I think it's important to spend just as much effort on recovery as the actual exercising, and a lot of people don't do that. The other aspect would be balancing, like pushing and pulling movements rather than just doing push-ups. Make sure you're doing horizontal pulling movements, rows, band pull aparts, whatever it is, where you're squeezing your shoulder blades together and pulling your arms back.
Right.
Because that's the opposite movement of the push-up. And if you don't do that, you'll start to develop tightness in the muscles you're working all the time, right? In the pectoral muscles and other internal rotators of the shoulder. And if that's all you're ever doing, it's kind of like we talked about with the spine and only working the rectus abdominis, the front muscles when you're doing sit-ups. It's going to pull everything out of alignment and position. And when you do that, when something changes alignment and position, the joints don't function the way that they should, and it's going to lead to pain eventually because it's not moving the way that it should. So just creating balance, looking at the movement that you're trying to improve, and you're doing a whole lot of push-ups or whatever else that movement is, and doing the opposite movement to kind of counteract it. And then as far as recovery, a lot of it is just whether it's foam rolling or there's a couple other releases that you can do for the chest just to keep the shoulder blades back and keep the mobility that you need. So, and then ice and ice baths, all that kind of stuff that everybody hates.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I'm not. I'm more of a hot bath kind
Right,
of
right.
person.
Yep.
But and you talked about how Epsom salt baths. There's some debate
There is, yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
them or
I
how
love
much
them. I don't
value,
know if they're
but
helping me, but I like Epsom salt
but
baths, I'll admit.
they help your mentality maybe
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
they
and
help your
yep.
body really. But
And if it's all psychological, that's totally fine.
right,
It
if
still
it
helps.
still works,
Yep.
it still works. I have a question because I heard somebody say that the I've heard someone say that even the ice bath can take away let me see. The way that it was described to me was that your body needs to go through the entire healing process
Right, right.
for it to have the strength to gain the strength. And if you
Uh-huh.
go to an ice bath, it can almost take away some of that.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. I've
Okay.
heard that as well.
Okay.
So there's definitely some debate there, and I think part of it is, I don't know. I'm a huge fan of ice baths still,
Yeah.
regardless of what the research says, because I've done them and they work for me. Like I know they're doing something good, but yeah, I've heard also that it can slow the healing process because of the microphages and all these interactions, chemical interactions, and everything within the body. But um, I think for a recovery standpoint is different than like injury treatment. For example, if you have actually damaged the tissue, you've torn a
Right.
muscle, you've done something like that, the ice might slow the recovery or might slow the healing process. However, from just a strictly inflammation, like I just worked out really hard, I have extra fluid there, an ice bath is going to help get rid of that fluid and return you back to it's going to help you recover from a workout quicker. Maybe not an injury. That's kind of my take on it. Injuries are one thing, but like post workout recovery, I'm a huge fan of ice baths.
I yeah. I think too, I mean, I'm one of the people that's fairly resistant to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I do see a lot of value in it, and I think that a lot of people actually could develop quite a bit of mental toughness
Absolutely.
by
Yeah.
going through it or making it a
Right,
practice.
right.
And like I've heard people starting with shorter time frames and then they get more and more comfortable with it,
Okay.
and
Yeah, yeah.
it's just one of those things that can help you learn to embrace something that's
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
ice baths are great for that.
yeah. But you're probably a pro at it by now
Oh no,
if it's
not even.
something really it's
And
still
honestly,
still very
it's
uncomfortable.
oh yeah, and it's the first 2 or 3 minutes that are the worst. Once you make it past that and everything starts to go numb, it's no big deal. But the first couple minutes are hard, absolutely still.
So if you do an ice bath for yourself at home, how much ice do you really need?
That's a good question. So usually I'll just buy one bag of ice and
One
then
bag
and then
is
run cold water.
right, and that's one
Yep.
bag is enough.
For me it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a like a standard prescription for ice
Or
baths.
if
How
you
much
like,
ice to how?
or if
Yeah.
you need a thermometer to check how
Right, right.
cold it
I
is,
wanna say
or
it's like 55 degrees is ideal. Um, and I just pulled that number out of my head. That seems like it's what it is, but I could be way off.
from all of the reading and research that
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
done. Well, I also remember you saying in your book that you're an optimist by nature,
I
and
am. Yes,
absolute
for
like
sure.
now that I've met you, I can see that that is without a doubt, absolutely true. But you feel like that you've just always been that way, or
I
have you?
have.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you
I've
didn't
always
have to
been.
cultivate it at all. It
No.
just is.
Yeah.
It's just you.
Yep. And that's bad sometimes because sometimes I'm in bad positions where I should probably worry a little more and I don't, and it gets me into trouble. But but overall, I think optimism is a good thing.
Well, I think there's a difference between taking something seriously and
Right.
being upset about it or
Uh-huh.
even worrying about it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
being able to see it clearly but still having an optimistic nature. Like
Right.
I just I just know that there's a lot of people who struggle with natural, authentic optimism.
Right,
You
right.
can try and
Try
force
and
feed
force
it
it.
yourself,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not, even exercising, like, you're not going to get very far if you're really trying to just force feed
Yeah,
yourself all the
that's true.
time.
That's true.
It becomes a very difficult
Uh-huh.
situation. So I was going to see if you had any feedback for people who struggle with.
I mean, sometimes you have to force feed it. Like if you look at motivation versus discipline, and I don't know if you listen to Jocko Willink at
Oh,
all,
yeah,
but
for sure.
he's huge on discipline
Yes.
rules. Like you're gonna go through phases where you're motivated and phases where you're not. And if you're relying on motivation, it's gonna be a problem, and you need to be disciplined
Yes.
to get ahead. So I can see where sometimes you need to force feed it, but yeah, you can't. I mean, you can't fake optimism for very long.
Right. I agree. It doesn't work out very well. So, do you have any other thoughts or feedback for the rising ranks of the military?
Um, I can't think of anything really just beyond like we've already talked about it, just getting outside your comfort zone and doing hard things and learning to embrace them as a learning opportunity and as an opportunity to improve. Uh, yeah, just do hard things and learn from them. Don't avoid doing the hard things because they're not comfortable.
Right, right, right. So, for someone who's wanting to work out or have goals for themselves, but they're struggling a little bit with that motivation, and they're
Yeah.
struggling with the discipline aspect. And I
Right.
know I've even talked to some of my new recruits, like sometimes I'll go to the gym and I'll
Uh-huh.
sit there in my car and like sometimes I'll actually look up motivational videos on
Yeah,
YouTube
yeah, yeah.
because there's a lot
Right.
of them, but it's like, oh, I can't get myself in there. I need
That's
some
funny.
motivation.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
what kind of advice do you have for people
So
who
I
are,
think I think the important thing is to find your why. Like a lot of people have goals and they'll tell you this is my goal, but you need to dig deeper and see why is it that that's your goal? Like what is it that goal will help you accomplish or a lot of I don't know. It can be anything. The important thing is that your reason for wanting to achieve the goal is strong enough to keep you going. So if you have a goal but there's not really a strong foundational reason that's going to benefit you, that is enough of a reason for you to push through and continue to do what you don't want to do, you're not going to get there. So maybe it's time to reevaluate your goals if you're in that position where your why isn't strong enough. But yeah,
right?
just find your why. What is it that you have this goal? Why do you have this goal? What is it that's going to keep you going when you don't want to?
I've realized that with that, sometimes you have to ask yourself why a few times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you might have a first-hand
Uh-huh.
response for why, but
Definitely.
then if you keep going a little bit deeper and ask
Uh-huh.
yourself why a few times,
Yeah,
then you
yeah, yeah.
can get to a deeper, more meaningful reason.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
sometimes, like, if you ask me, well, why do you want to improve your run speed? And it's like,
Uh-huh.
I want to beat myself at basic training. Well, why do you want to do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
Then you start pushing deeper and
Right.
deeper,
For
and then
sure.
you can find something that actually has the power to continue
Uh-huh.
to drive you. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of times people have meaning and reason and purpose, but they're not always connected to it on a deep enough level.
Yeah, I agree. I
So
agree.
I like what you're saying for sure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I really
Thanks for having
appreciate
me.
you being on the show and sharing your insight and really giving great, good advice about preparing for a military PT. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Have you heard about the Army's new PT test?
Yes.
It's
Yep.
amazing, right?
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
It's fantastic.
overall the concept of it is
Overall,
great,
the
right?
concept, it's going in a good direction.
Right.
Definitely.
Are there some of the
Yes.
exercises that you would have
Not
chosen differently?
not necessarily. I'm trying to remember what it is. So
The thing that
if Is a plank one of them? That might be something different. I think the law enforcement's kind of going a different direction too, and they're going to do a plank instead of sit-ups, which is awesome, and I think that's great. I can't remember if that's one of the changes with the Army well.
I haven't seen the full
But anyway,
APT.
so my main concern there is the quality of the plank. Like it's difficult to maintain a quality plank, and to realize when it switches from being quality and when it switches to not being a quality plank.
Oh yeah.
So as somebody's doing a plank, they can hold it a lot longer than they probably should. In some instances, like they will lose lumbar stability, but they'll still be able to hold the plank. And so continuing the plank isn't doing them any good. And it's kind of like you have to have a very astute observer watching the test, I think, to get it. And I don't know.
To actually know the difference.
Yeah, I think a plank versus a sit-up is fantastic. I think that's a great direction, but it's going to take more effort on the people that are administering the test, and even the setup and everything is going to take more. But yeah, I love the direction that it's going.
Just because it's not as difficult, or is it actually hurtful to the?
I mean, it's probably not going to hurt them in that minute or 2 minutes or whatever that they're trying to go, but it's just it stops being an accurate measure of core stability, which is what they're trying to measure. Like as soon as you lose that lumbar stability, your hips tilt. It's no longer. You can continue to hold it there, but it's no longer measuring what you want it to measure.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it.
So I think it's great. Like I definitely love the change.
Yeah.
I was at a tactical strength and conditioning conference at the National Strength and Conditioning headquarters, and one of our speakers was the director of sport science for the Army. And I'll always remember one thing that he said. He said, if ever I have to run 2 miles in battle, something went horribly wrong. Like that's not a good indication of what quality soldier you will be. And that's always kind of stuck. So so I think it's great to get away from just push-ups, sit-ups, and running.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I've been surprised because a lot of times when there's big changes in the military, you hear quite a bit of pushback from people that are like, leave it this way it was.
Right.
But I've only heard positive.
Even
if people are needing to learn or push themselves in a way that they haven't before, they still seem to be really embracing it. And I think it makes a lot of sense too, because they've gotten rid of age and gender barriers and have just said, for this job you need to be able to perform to this standard across the board. And I think that makes so much sense.
I think so. I agree.
So I'm excited to see how it all changes and integrates over time, because I'm sure the other branches will follow suit as long as it's successful in the Army. But I like to see the more functional
definitely. Yep, it's a lot better indicator of someone's fitness.
Or their capacity to
perform a job. Yes.
And especially like something that more tactical wartime related. Right.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed your book. Like I said, it was a little overwhelming when I first got it, 'cause I thought it sounded like a nice book, but then I got it and I was like, whoa, this is a big book, and it is like full of so much content.
Right. I honestly wonder how many people have actually read the whole thing.
Probably not page to page.
Right, for sure.
But it's amazing, and you can tell that it was a labor of love, that you've really put a lot of time, work, and effort into compiling this. So thanks for being on the show.
You bet. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found a new mindset to help you excel. If you want a link to connect to Arlo's book, there's one in the show notes, or you can just search for Battle Tested on Amazon. There is also a link to the video that he referenced on YouTube in the show notes. And if you found something really helpful, I would love to hear about it. please let me know about it on the tampfpodcast.com website or on any of the social media sites.